It was almost twilight when the phone buzzed, cutting through the calm of my evening routine. I was stacking linens in the laundry room, the gentle hum of the dryer muffling the first few rings. When I saw Ethan's name flash on the screen, a faint smile crossed my face despite everything. "Hey, love," I answered, wedging the phone against my shoulder. "Hey, Mom," he replied, sounding slightly preoccupied. "Just checking in. Leela and I are grabbing dinner tonight, some cafe her friend suggested. Paris is pricey, but she's thrilled." I asked about the weather, if the hotel was comfortable, whether he'd walked along the Seine yet. His responses were brief, courteous. I didn't mind. I was accustomed to being the one who asked questions. After a few minutes, he said, "Anyway, we'll catch up more later, okay? Love you. Love you too," I replied, waiting for the call to end. But it didn't. There was a pause, then the rustle of Ethan shifting the phone, perhaps slipping it into his jacket. Leela's voice came through next, soft but near. "Who was that, your mom?" he mumbled. "Something about the house again, probably." "Likely that drip in the spare bathroom," Leela said with a chuckle. My breath caught, my hand frozen on the dryer's edge. "Well, it's technically hers." "For now," Ethan said, his tone edged. "She's a weight on us. We'll convince her to sign over the deed eventually. Guilt always works." My face went cold. I couldn't move, couldn't disconnect. I stood there surrounded by folded clothes and soft light, suddenly chilled. They were scheming. And the house, my house, was only the beginning. Grief, when it first arrives, seeps like water. Silent, pervasive, relentless. I was 42 when it swallowed the life I knew. Daniel's death came out of nowhere, leaving a weary wife, a teenage son, and just enough insurance to keep us from complete collapse. I remember signing the final documents for the payout. The agent kept calling it a settlement, as if money could replace Daniel's steady kindness or the way he always made Ethan smile, even on tough days. I didn't touch the funds for a year. Then, gradually, I began rebuilding around the void he left. The house came first, a simple, cream-colored craftsman on the outskirts of Asheville, with sturdy bones and a warm spirit. I chose it because Daniel would have loved the veranda and the maple in the yard. I made it ours with careful touches, fresh paint, weekend gardening, thrift store finds. I rebuilt myself, too. It was the only thing I'd ever owned that felt truly mine. It was meant to be Ethan's safe haven. I didn't date. I worked. I sacrificed. 2 jobs most years, 3 in the summers when Ethan needed camp, textbooks, or braces. I told myself that was enough, that mothering fiercely was its own kind of devotion. When he got into NYU, I wept in the diner parking lot where I waitressed. The scholarship wasn't enough, but we made it work. I sold my mother's necklace, dipped into the insurance, took extra shifts. I told him to focus on his studies. He swore he'd never forget what I'd done. After graduation, he and Leela moved back to North Carolina temporarily. Layoffs, they said, rent was steep. I didn't hesitate. I gave them the upstairs, repainted the guest room myself. Leela liked the soft taupe. I stayed silent when she swapped out the drapes, or when Ethan redirected the mail to their names. Even when they started calling it the house instead of Mom's house, I let it go. Maybe I hoped we'd be a family again under one roof. Maybe I was tired of dining alone. I never imagined the hands I'd raised would reach for what I'd fought to hold together. Now, hearing those words, she's a weight. The memories flooded back, each sharper than the last. The mortgage I carried alone. The holidays I missed for extra shifts. The backaches I ignored. The joys I set aside. Yet it wasn't the betrayal that struck deepest. It was the quiet part of me that wasn't surprised. I folded the last towel, smoothed it flat, and placed it on the stack. Then I walked to my room, pulled the lockbox from under the bed, and opened it to find the deed. It didn't happen suddenly. If it had, I might have stopped it. But erosion is subtle. It wears you down bit by bit until the landscape you knew is gone. They started calling it our house a few months after moving in. At first, I thought it was just careless wording. "We should fix the deck," Leela would say, or "we're considering a new oven." When Ethan added, "I'll handle the bills now, easier if it's all streamlined," I told myself it was generosity, support, a grown son easing my load. I didn't question why the utility bills went to his email or why the gas company started addressing me as Mrs. Carver Jr. instead of Nora. I just nodded. I told myself not to fuss. Leela repainted the hallway one weekend while I was at church. "It needed a refresh," she said brightly. The warm beige I'd chosen was gone, replaced by a stark white that matched their decor. I stood there, blinking, hiding my reaction. She hugged me and said, "We're making something wonderful here." I nodded, letting her think I agreed. Then came the talk about the nursery. Leela sat across from me at the kitchen table, one hand on her coffee cup she never cleaned, the other on her stomach. "We've been thinking," she said, smiling. "If this works out, we'd love to turn your room into the baby's room. You'd still have the guest room, of course. It's snug." Ethan didn't look up from his phone, as if it was already settled. That night, I lay awake in the room they wanted to claim, listening to the wind shake the windows Daniel had once weatherproofed. I realized how small I'd become in my own home. Every corner now carried someone else's mark. I reached over, flicked on the lamp, and opened the bedside drawer. Inside was the letter Ethan wrote from college, ending with, "I'll always look out for you, Mom." I folded it neatly and placed it beside the deed. I told myself not to listen again. I'd heard enough. The words were seared into me, jagged as shattered glass. "She's a weight." But some small, wounded part of me, still hoping it was a mistake, pressed play again. The recording hissed softly, Ethan's voice faint at first. "She'll cave if we remind her how much she owes us." Leela's laugh followed. "Just bring up the college loans and how she hasn't paid rent since we moved in." I paused, my thumb over the screen. I hadn't paid rent in my own house. I pressed play again. "She's emotionally reliant. We don't need to be harsh," Ethan said. "Just make her feel like we're her only family." "She's easy to guilt," Leela agreed. "Once we're on the deed, we can finally renovate properly." There was a clink of cutlery, glasses, then Leela more casually. "We'll take the master bedroom when we're back. It's senseless for her to have the biggest room when she barely contributes anymore." That cut deeper than the rest. I paused, closed my eyes, and let the silence settle. They were in some Parisian cafe, eating food I'd indirectly funded, plotting to edge me out of the life I'd built for us all. I pressed play one last time. "She doesn't even see how close we are to taking it all," Ethan said. "If she resists, we mention retirement homes, healthcare. She's not getting younger." "Possession is most of the law," Leela said lightly. "We've lived there for years. A judge would side with us." They laughed, the sound I once cherished, the one I'd strained to hear from the kitchen as a young mother, just trying to cook dinner and keep Ethan happy. Now it turned my stomach. I recorded everything and saved it. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, hands around a cold mug of tea I forgot to sip. Every corner of the house echoed memories. Ethan's birthday parties in the living room, Daniel's footprints in the garden, late nights folding laundry for school. I'd given everything, and it still wasn't enough to be safe from their plans. By morning, something in me had settled, not peace but a quiet resolve. I wouldn't beg for space in my own home. I wouldn't let them define my worth. I opened the drawer, took out the deed, and started making calls. Claire didn't ask why I appeared at her office that morning. She just ushered me in, closed the door, and poured coffee into the chipped mug on her desk. "You look like you're here to fix something," she said. I slid the deed across. "Can you confirm I'm the sole owner?" She scanned it briskly and nodded. "No co-owners, no liens, no additions." "It's yours alone, Nora." That was all I needed. I shared what I'd overheard just enough. Her face stayed steady, but her eyes sharpened. Claire had known Ethan since he was a toddler. She danced at my wedding, held my hand at Daniel's funeral. Now she said nothing, just reached for her notepad and began writing. Over the next hour we planned, legal safeguards, timelines, contingencies. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I signed what needed signing, made copies, and thanked her as I left. By day's end, I had a meeting set with a realtor from a neighboring town. Lucas, discreet and professional, had worked with me before. When I told him I needed a quick, quiet sale, he didn't blink. "We'll price it to sell fast. I know buyers who'd love it." I packed only what I'd brought to the house: photos, linens, a worn armchair Daniel loved, my books. Everything else I inventoried. Ethan's belongings went into labeled boxes, loaded into a moving truck I arranged. I prepaid a storage unit and left the access code with Claire. I told no one I was leaving. I found a furnished rental in Richmond, with pale floors and blank walls that held no history. On my last night in the house, I stood in the kitchen alone and left a note on the counter where Ethan and Leela would see it. Surprise. "Oh wait, did this?" I placed the keys beside it, locked the door, and left through the garage one last time. As I drove through familiar streets, the town blurred like a watercolor in the rain, and the road ahead began to widen. They returned on a Wednesday. I knew because the calls started just after noon and didn't stop. Ethan, then Leela, then Ethan again, missed calls, voicemails, texts, each more frantic. "Mom," Ethan's voice crackled in the first voicemail. "The key doesn't work." "Did you change the locks? What's happening?" The second was sharper. "Nora, this isn't a joke. Where's everything? Where are you?" I didn't listen in real time. I let them stack up as I sat in my new rental's kitchen, stirring sugar into coffee I didn't want. I stared out the window, letting silence respond. By evening, their tone shifted. Leela's voice, syrupy but edged, filled one message. "We're just worried, okay? Please call. Let us know you're okay." Okay, I smiled. For the first time in years, I was. Later, Ethan left a final message, voice tight. "We saw the note. I don't know what you think you heard, but you've made a huge mistake. This was our home, too. You had no right to sell it. We're getting a lawyer." I saved that one, too. I didn't reply. I didn't explain or comfort. Let them shout into the void. Let them wonder where the line between love and control broke. The house was gone. The door no longer opened for them, and my silence spoke louder than words. They demanded a meeting. Ethan's message was curt. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. cafe on Broad. If you don't show, we're coming to your work." So I went. I arrived at 10:05, not to be rude, but deliberate. Ethan and Leela sat stiffly, hands around untouched cups, radiating rehearsed outrage. I didn't greet them. I sat, placed my phone on the table, and pressed play. Their voices poured out, familiar and cutting. "She's a weight. We'll take the master bedroom. Guilt always works." Leela paled. Ethan's jaw tightened, caught between anger and denial. "You misunderstood," he said flatly. "No," I replied. "I finally understood." Leela leaned forward, voice soft but sharp. "You blindsided us. You sold our home." "It was never yours," I said evenly. "It was mine, paid for, maintained, protected." Ethan scoffed. "After all we've done for you." I met his gaze. "Yes, and you showed me exactly what to avoid becoming." They didn't know how to respond. I didn't give them time. No money, no access to my accounts, no address, no second chances. Leela opened her mouth, then closed it. Ethan's fists clenched, knuckles pale. "I'm your son," he said, as if it carried weight. "And I was your mother," I said softly, "not your property." We sat in silence, one they'd never learned to endure. I stood, slid an envelope with the storage unit details across the table, and left. They didn't call my name. The quiet in my new apartment felt different, not the hollow kind I used to fill with others' needs. It was gentle, complete. I wasn't waiting for a knock, a call, or a demand. I made tea in the mornings, real tea, not forgotten mugs. I sat by the window, watched birds on the sill, read whole books without interruption. Some days I spoke to no one, and I liked it. But I didn't vanish. Weeks later, I found a community center hosting grief and boundary workshops. It felt odd at first, sitting in a circle, saying my name like I was starting anew. But I didn't talk about Ethan directly. I spoke about the quiet ways we lose ourselves caring for others. I met women who'd faced worse, others learning to say no for the first time. We didn't heal each other. We listened. That was enough. One evening, a woman named Aisha pulled me aside. She ran a shelter for single mothers. "We could use you," she said. "Not to lecture, just to sit, be honest." So I started going, once a week, then more. I sat with young mothers who had no one left to trust, listened to their stories, shared pieces of mine, not the bitter parts, just the ones that showed they weren't alone. I didn't tell them what to do. I let them decide. One afternoon, walking home in the crisp fall air, I realized I hadn't thought of Ethan in days, not with pain or anger, just distance. Not every loss is a wound. Some are the first steps toward something truly yours. A year passed quietly. No grand gestures, just steady, honest days, mine. The anniversary crept up. I noticed it only when a yellow leaf fell outside my window. Autumn was always Daniel's season, and Ethan's too, when he was young. I used to pile leaves for him to leap into, laughing. I made tea, sat at my kitchen table with my journal, no one expecting anything of me. I opened a blank page and wrote a letter, not to Ethan, to myself. "You were never a weight, you were the cornerstone. You held it all together. You carried what no one saw, gave more than anyone returned. When they tried to reduce you to your utility, you walked away. That wasn't cruelty, it was clarity." I signed it simply. Later I walked. I didn't plan to pass the old neighborhood, but my feet led me there. I slowed as I reached the street, not to look back, but to move through. The house stood there, familiar yet distant. Someone had repainted the door. The porch was tidy. It didn't hurt as I'd expected. I didn't linger or hope for a face in the window. I kept walking. I didn't lose my son. That truth settled softly, without bitterness. I lost the version of him I wanted to believe in, the boy who'd never turn from me, the man who'd remember the hands that built his world. What I let go wasn't a child. It was the illusion that he saw me, and in that space I found myself.